Hi everyone, welcome back to the shop. I'm going to be testing 12 vices today. We're going to be testing for strength and durability with max clamping force with a handle, a shock load, and build quality test to failure. We're going to be testing vices you can purchase new online or at your local store, or a vintage vise you can find at a swap meet or yard sale, and a vise that I built right here in this shop. I want to thank everybody that's donated these vices. Without you, this test would not happen. With so many options out there to purchase, you the viewers have sent in 12 vices you'd like to see me test, and we're going to test their build quality. Here's the vices we're going to be testing today. We got the Harbor Freight Central Forge 5-inch swivel vise with anvil. The jaws are removable. They do feel hardened and they got a pretty good knurl to them. We got a swivel base with dual handles on each side, and it is made of gray cast iron. It feels kind of hollow. Is that a good word to describe build quality? It just feels lightweight. Here's the in and out motion. So build quality is what you'd expect for $50. We got the 5-inch DeWalt bench vise here with a swivel base. It's made of cast iron. I kind of like that this anvil is the same height as the jaws, so if you want to put something on here and tap away, you can kind of extend it out, which I think is a neat feature. What's cool about this vise that I like is that it has this quick half nut, and this has a buttress thread. This is the only one out of the test that has this thread type, which is supposedly pretty strong. I like that the jaws has this little groove in here for small pieces of material stock to hold on to. It has the probably least amount of backlash out of all these, which is pretty nice. Overall, I think it's a cool looking vise. Fit and finish is pretty good on this. We got the Wilton trailer hitch vise going on here. This is a pretty neat vise because you could just slip it into your trailer hitch on the back of your service truck or pickup truck, or maybe even weld some receiver tube on your welding table and use it when you need it or at a different location. So it's kind of a neat concept. This has a pretty good opening size. I think this will go up to 8 inches, I believe. But one of the things I noticed is how much slop there is in this dynamic jaw, which would kind of frustrate me depending on what I'm doing. I'm not too sure about that. This is one feature of this vise that's a little bit strange. This is a fixed handle. That's it, right? So as you can see, it's really short so that it doesn't really get above this jaw to get in your way, which is kind of an interesting design. So you have a really short handle, and it seems to be never in the right place. You can't pull on it. It's awkward. It's kind of weird to only have one handle. So an interesting design. We got a 5-inch Hoyer vise. This is the most expensive vise that we're testing here. In Germany and Europe, you can find this vise for around $200, but here in the States, it's quite a bit more expensive. It has a really unique design. It has like this rail system. You can see it's machined, and then the screw is over the top. And the body, you see this nut comes through here, it squeezes on this rail, and that's what gives you your adjustment. And the way the jaws are held on are kind of unique too from the back, which I like so that the screws don't get damaged. Close to a 6 thread per inch spindle, so we should see pretty high clamping force with just the handle. This vise is made from forged steel, so this thing should be really strong and hard to break. This is a Wilton Tradesman here. The material is ductile iron, so this thing's going to be pretty strong. And this is a 5-inch jaw with a 5-inch opening. But what I noticed, that 5-inch opening, you got a lot of slop because this slide here is just barely in this tube. It has smooth jaws and a swivel base, and sheesh, this is a heavy duty swivel base. It doesn't have the pipe jaws inside, but I think you can add them. This one's going to be tough to beat. The material is ductile iron, so this thing's going to be pretty strong. Next up is the Yost 905 AS heavy duty bench vise. This is a 5-inch jaw. It's also made out of gray cast iron. It opens up to about 5 inches. The fit and finish is pretty loose, let's just say that. The spindle is loose in the dynamic jaw. It too approximately has 6 threads per inch. This has a steel slide, which is kind of interesting. We'll see how it holds up. We got the Wilton Mechanics Pro. This is a pretty tried and true design. It's favored by lots. We have a 5-inch jaw, but only like a 4-inch opening, which is kind of disappointing. But we got hardened pipe jaws here on the inside and on the bottom, and also with a dual clamp swivel base. This is ductile iron. The one thing I do like about this vise is the fit and the finish, and how tight the vise is pretty good. We got the Irwin swivel vise here. It has a 5-inch jaw and about a 5-inch opening. What's kind of cool about it is that it swivels in 2 directions. You got the swivel base, and then you have the swivel, so you can switch between pipe jaws or flat jaws. That is a little bit weird that it moves back and forth like that. This pin in here isn't too precise, and even when this jaw is fixed, got quite a bit of movement in the dynamic jaw. The backlash in the screw feels pretty good. This is made out of cast iron with a steel shaft, it looks like. And it looks like these jaws are removable or replaceable. It's kind of interesting. Next up is the Prentice Bulldog vise. The vise is constructed of gray cast iron. The jaw opens to 8 inches. Funny story about this Prentice Bulldog here is I found this at a thrift store, saw that it had a crack in the tail slide here, which I knew that I could repair and fix, so I thought it was a good candidate for a restoration project. Upon further inspection, after removing all the caked on paint and grease, was that somebody has already repaired this vise. What I find unique about that is the handle is still intact. I anticipated this handle to be bent with a break like that. So seeing that this Prentice is not indestructible, I would still like to test it and see how this repair job held up, along if this crack in the tail slide does affect performance. The backlash is horrendous before the jaw actually moves, but this is something that you're going to have to deal with when you buy a used vise. You're going to deal with all these problems. But let's put it through the test anyway. We got a 5-inch Yost vise here. This is the ductile iron version, which is the top dog. It has these 2 gibs that are able to take the slop out of the tail. It has a pretty large opening for its jaw size. It also has 2 swivel clamps on here. Hardened steel ground jaws, looks like on the top. Overall feels pretty nice. It has pipe jaws in there also. But the one thing that's kind of weird is this backlash in the nut. That would kind of bug me a little bit. But it's made out of ductile iron, so this thing is going to be tough to break. We got ourselves a Wilton here. We have a 5-inch jaw with only a 4-inch opening. This does have a swivel base. It's cast iron with a steel slide. What's fascinating is I'm really curious how they got this steel slide to mate with this cast iron dynamic jaw here. This is going to be interesting to see how this connection holds up. We do have a pipe jaw here and some serrated hardened jaws that are removable. Fit and finish is kind of what you'd be expected in this price range. The thread is also 6 threads per inch. Not too precision, but we'll see how it holds up in a strength test. Up next on the torture test is the Fireball tube vise. This is made out of 3x4 mild steel tube with 1/2-inch plate for the sides. This has a capacity of opening up to 16 inches. This has a 1-inch 8 thread pitch and thrust bearings on both sides of the handle, so it's really smooth to operate. Having the 8 threads per inch is a trade-off for clamping force versus speed, and I want clamping force in this design. The handle has dual speeds, fast, torque. This has a swivel base. The fit and finish is by far, I hate to say it, a lot better than one of the ones you can purchase. Is that biased by saying that? But it's the truth. It's just you're able to take the extra care in building a vise than purchasing one sometimes. It's going to be a shame to break it. This is definitely a tool crime, but I want to discover where the weaknesses are in a design like this, and the only way to do that is to literally break the vise. If you'd like to see how I built this vise, I have a video on it, and I'll leave a link in the description below. The first test is designed to just see how much clamping force the vise can produce with just the handle. Next up is the Harbor Freight Central Forge. Okay, maximum force by hand is 64.26. Up next is the DeWalt. As tight as I can get it. We got a peak of 6,219. Next up is the Wilton trailer hitch vise. I can't get any more than that. Where did it peak at? Peaked 37.74. Next up is the Hoyer. Oh, jeez. About as much as it goes, 8,000 pounds. Next up is the Wilton Tradesman. That's it. With a peak of 42.44. Next up is the Yoast 905. Okay, best I could do. Peak 57.84. Next up is the Wilton Mechanics Pro. It's as high as I can go. 35.82. Next up is the Irwin Multi-Purpose. Tight as I can get it by hand. So that's 7,258 pounds with just the handle. Next up is the Prentice Bulldog. As tight as I can get it. We peaked at 11,195. Next up is the Yoast ADI. As far as she goes. Peak 8,669. Next up is the Wilton 675. Something's already breaking. Heard a tick. That's it. Peak 4,214. Next up is the Fireball vise. 5,000 pounds halfway, feels pretty tight. And then torque mode. That's the best I get. Let's see, that was what? Peak value there for the handle. 16,462 pounds with a 8-inch long handle. At the end of the day, a vise is designed to clamp and hold your parts. This graph is a direct indication of how well it will perform that task. The next thing we're going to test is shock load, where we clamp a 1x2 bar in the vise jaws, clamp it as tightly as possible, and hit it with a sledgehammer 10 times as hard as I can. This will find the weakness in the body or the base and how it's connected to the table, and also the overall construction of the vise. Next up is the Harbor Freight Central Forge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The jaws are all loose now, but it survived. There is some Bondo that started to chip off on the side of where it was painted. The paint came off the back, but overall it survived. Up next is the DeWalt. Well, we definitely loosened up the base, so I'm thinking that bar that spreads across here, we bent it. Next up is the Wilton trailer hitch vise. coming loose. Loosen something up. Ready? What the heck? Oh, oh. Stupid thing. Won't stay tight. And I might have already bent it. This jaw, how it's attached to this sliding tube is the mechanical connection there is failing. And right now the handle is really tough. I didn't even get to 10 hits. And every time I hit it, it would just loosen up on me. But I think we can take it to failure. You can see something separating in there. It's bending. Next up is the Hoyer. For such a little vise, it's pretty strong. That's one benefit to having this fixed base, that you get a lot of rigidity, and that's not a weak spot when you do these impact tests. But overall, it's still nice and tight, held onto the bar well. Ooh, something was a little jerky right there. Ooh, put a little stress on that spindle. We got some slop in her. We might have stretched the threads a little bit. Ooh. Oh, bonk. I don't know, we might have wrecked the nut in there. Next up is the Wilton Tradesman. Everything seems nice and tight, didn't wiggle loose. It's obviously designed with the intent of hammering. Nicely done. Next up is the Yoast 905. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can't get the adjusters any tighter, so we did some damage inside here at the swivel. We'll inspect it when we pull it off. Next up is the Wilton Mechanics Pro. Well, the strap broke. This seems to be a weak link in all these vices. Man, so when it comes time to purchase one, flip it over, see what the strap looks like, and that will tell you this is not a vise to be hammering on. Next up is the Irwin Multi-Purpose. I noticed the base kind of loosened up a little bit, but overall the construction, man, it survived. The bar held in the jaw is pretty good. It's about as loose as it was before. I think we're ready to move on to the next test. Next up is the Prentice Bulldog. I think this is how the original jaw broke, was doing something like this, because the handle wasn't bent. So I was kind of halfway expecting the jaw just to pop back off, but the repair held. This is why we love old vices like this. They just are stout, and not having that swivel base really just contains all that power. I can tell when I was hitting this bar that it was just pretty solid. So this is why these old vices have such a good reputation. Next up is the Yoast 80i. This strap, it looks like it's made out of cast iron. It just snapped, and that's what holds it inside this ring. This vise is repairable though. We could build another strap and put this back together again, and off we go. Next up is the Wilton 675. We had a catastrophic failure, 4 hits and the vise broke. If you look at the way it's designed, this is all empty right here, and then it's just bolted down with this one pin. So of course it's going to break. But I think we can still proceed with a test, the strength test, the clamping force. I'm going to undo this base and bolt this body right to the base plate, and we'll see how well it clamps. Next up is the Fireball vise. I'm surprised. I gave her my all. I was trying to break it, that these actually held up. I could feel it kind of have a little spring in it when I was hitting it, but it's still super solid. I mean, it didn't loosen up at all. Look what it did to the soft jaw. I designed these to be replaceable and remachinable, so this is good. I want it to do this. I don't want it to damage the part that I have inside the vise. Overall, it survived. This next test is designed to find the weak link in the clamping mechanism and what fails first. And in order to do that, we're going to put a cheater bar in the handle and twist away till the vise fails. Next up is the Harbor Freight Central Forge. Look what failed. They drilled a hole for this spring to give like that back, to take out the backlash, but they weakened the whole shaft by putting that hole right through there. So design flaw number 1, don't drill a hole right in the middle of your spindle. It's gonna break. Up next is the DeWalt. $270. So what's happening is this little arm has got a little cam on it, and it pulls this pin out and up and down, and I suspect something's broken inside there because we got no action. Next up is the Wilton trailer hitch vise. Peaked out at 48.79. Woohoo! Big numbers from the Wilton trailer hitch vise. Snapped off right at the spindle. This has I think one of the smallest spindles on all these vices. This is only like 5/8. I'm not quite sure how this piece of tube steel is fastened to this jaw. The jaw feels really strong. Just whatever connection this is weak. I love the proof of concept to be able to put a trailer hitch vise in your trailer hitch. I think this has potential. I think it falls a little bit short on the build quality. Kind of disappointed in this design. I thought this was going to do really well. Next up is the Hoyer. Even at 10,000 pounds, it's spreading this base apart, and it's actually touching the table and wedged up against the tail. So I don't know how tight you have to have this for it to not do that. We're at 190 foot-pounds, 215. Peak number is 18,845 pounds. It broke up here. Looks like this spindle is hardened by looking at the grain structure. Yeah, it's locked up. Bent are good. Next up is the Wilton Tradesman. Okay, there goes the handle. I'm gonna switch to the torque wrench. A lot of twisting going on. Oh, clamping force is going down. Let's see, we peaked at 10,710. Looks like I just literally twisted the all thread right in half. Just sheared it right off right there at the nut. So it still feels fairly tight. It feels like it did. We just literally stretched that all thread apart, which means the body of the vise is a lot stronger than the thread. So it's salvageable. I think it's rebuildable. Just make a new thread for it, put it back into service. All's not lost. Next up is the Yoast 905. $128, $127 foot-pounds. All right, peak number is 10,794. Once again, the spindle broke right where they put that collar through to hold for the backlash. Let's flip it over and look at the swivel that broke first. Well, we bent that piece of, that's just a piece of hot rolled flat bar that keeps the swivel in check. That bent on the impact. So you'd be fighting this bending all the time if you're trying to do any hammering or bending. Next up is the Wilton Mechanics Pro. Okay, let's see what it peaked out at. 6,807 pounds. The handle snapped off. The spindle broke right where they put that pin through. Man, look at so weak. That's a huge design flaw. Do not put pins in spindles. Next up is the Irwin Multi-Purpose. That's already 180 foot-pounds. Something's already breaking, it feels like. Something's gonna break right here. Next one. Okay, I lied. Next one. It's getting loose. Something's happening. Did I say that already? Something's giving. It's just pulling through the casting. We peaked at 11,195. The failure point, we stripped the threads out inside this body. It no longer engages, so that's too bad. With a peak pressure of what, 11,000 pounds? Not too shabby, and its versatility, this is a pretty strong vise. Next up is the Prentice Bulldog. it goes. Oh, we're stripping the threads out. Peak value, 15,987 pounds. Ooh, that is so crunchy. Ooh. Literally sheared that nut off. See, there it goes. Sheesh, but look how much nut engagement there is on these old things. Man, that's 3.5 inches easy of thread engagement. Whew, gave me a workout. Put a new spindle in here. Man, this baby's good as new. Built a new block for it, put it back to work. Next up is the Yoast 80i. Peak 16,953. All right, we broke the screw right there at the head, right where they necked it down, and it found the weak link and snapped it off. I think with a new strap across the base, a new spindle, this thing could be put back to work again. Next up is the Wilton 675. 150 foot-pounds. $165, $170. Peak is 5,989. Looks like we got another spindle failure, right? The very last thread twisted it right off. And that's like 4 threads per inch, so that's one of the reasons why the power was so low. Next up is the Fireball vise. Okay, the vise is still going. I just snapped my ratchet off. I'm gonna put a pipe wrench on here and I'm gonna see if I can go a little bit more. Okay, I think that's it. Let's see where we peaked. 40,557. Holy smokes, I'm pitting out, sweating all over the place. This vise has given me a huge workout trying to break it. Starting to bow this jaw right here from that pressure point of the meter. It's not spread over a large distance. So here's the thing, it's a little bit gritty. It's not as smooth as it once was. I'm wondering if it's this bearing inside here. It's a little bit chewed up, but it still opens and it still functions. None of these other vices could do that. Dude, guys, this is made with just parts around the shop. It's freaking incredible. I am literally blown away. I'm really curious to see what failed inside the vise. So let's pop this cap off. The screw looks like brand new. Okay, that's awfully weird. I mean, it still feels pretty dang good. So here's what I think happened. These 2 jam nuts were contacting this plate inside this tube, and it was grinding and it loosened up, causing friction. So I don't know quite why it made contact. Either something kind of bent inside there, but I think if I take these nuts back to the grinder and grind them down a little bit, it will work just like new. So what do I learn from all this carnage? If I go to purchase a vise, well, I'm going to be looking for a vise that has the largest spindle diameter possible and the finest pitch thread. That's going to get me my most clamping force. And also I'm going to avoid a swivel base. I think that is a common failure that I've seen in all of these if it's not designed properly. Just out of curiosity, this is going to be a little bonus clip to see what this Starrett 924 clamping pressure is. I'm really curious. peaked out at 6,300. Oh, this is the one thing I hate about these vices too. There's no bearing in the spindle, so it's just as hard to get loose as it is to tighten. One more vise I want to test here in the shop is the milling machine vise. I'm going to first test it with this little half Z handle that I like and I use 99% of the time, and then we'll switch to the long handle and see what the force is. Okay, that's pretty tight with that little handle, 7,000 pounds. And then when we really want to squeeze on it, let's see what we got here. 14,000. This is always fun to test this kind of stuff. I always find it interesting, so hope you guys enjoyed this. I'd like to know what your guys' favorite vise is, so please post in the comments.